If everybody would take a seat, we'll go ahead and get started with the February 6th Planning Board meeting. I will now call to order the meeting of the Omaha Planning Board. The Planning Board members that are here today are Trenton Magid, David Rosacker, Michael Pate, Patrick Morse, Christine Carnes, Vice Chair, and I am Greg Rosenbaum, Chairman. Members of the city staff that are in attendance today are Dave Fanslau, Planning Director, Sherry Rockwell, Acting Assistant Planning Director, Eric England, Planning Manager, Mike Carter, Planning Board Administrator, Alan Thieland from the City Law Department, and Lisa Agans, our Recording Secretary. Our rules of procedure are as follows. Notice of this hearing has been published. Copies of today's agenda are located on the table in front of us. They're right over here. You are welcome to come down and pick one up. The cases on the consent agenda will be heard first. Consent cases are perceived by the Planning Board to be non-controversial, have already been heard or been recommended for layover, and therefore will be read and voted on without the opportunity for your testimony. If you wish to testify, you may remove the case from the consent agenda. When each consent case is read, I will ask if anyone wants the case removed. If you do, please stand up and say so, and the case will be removed. The case then will be heard in the order in which it appears on the regular agenda after we go through the consent cases. When the case is heard, you will have the opportunity to come to the podium, clearly state your name and address, and give your testimony at that time. When hearing cases on the regular agenda, the board will first hear from the applicant. After the applicant states their case, we will hear from the proponents, and then we will hear from the opponents. After both sides are heard, the public hearing will be closed and no additional testimony will be permitted unless a board member requests additional information. When at the podium, please clearly state your name, address, and whom you are representing for the record. Your testimony is very important to us. In the interest of time and courtesy to others, please be short and to the point. We will try to limit each case to 10 minutes. Those directly involved in the case, please speak first. We request that large groups select a spokesperson to represent that group, therefore eliminating repetitive testimony. When giving testimony, please provide new information and try not to repeat what has previously been said. We do ask that all speakers and others be treated with courtesy and with respect. In that regard, please remain silent while seated, and if you'd take time now to turn off your cell phones, that would be appreciated. Our decision to approve, deny, or continue a case made here today will be forwarded to the City Council for another public hearing and final disposition by the City Council. Conditional use permits are an exception to this rule. The board's decision made here today on conditional use permits are final and not forwarded to the City Council. Lastly, upon the advice of the Law Department, all communications to the board members from attorneys or other interested parties should be transmitted through the Planning Department so that they are made a part of the public record. The department will then transmit all that information to the board as well as to the rest of the public. Rezoning matters are an exception to this rule. A current copy of the Nebraska Open Meetings Act can be found on the northeast wall of this room. And we do not have any changes to the consent agenda, so I'm going to start reading the consent cases. Agenda item number 7, case C10-19-006, C12-19-007. Just a second, sir, and we will. Applicant is A1 Development. It is on consent for approval. The request is preliminary plat approval of Lake Cunningham Village, a cluster subdivision outside the city limits with rezoning from DR to R5. Location, southeast of 96th and State Street, and it has been asked to be removed, and that will be taken up on the regular agenda. Agenda item number 9, case C12-19-25, applicant Clarity Development Company. It is on for approval. The request, preliminary and final plat approval of South Hill Edition, a minor plat inside the city limits with a waiver of section 5384A lot depth. Location, 1301 South 12th Street. Does anyone wish to have this removed from the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none. Agenda item number 11, case C12-19-28, applicant Noddle Companies. It is on for approval. Request, preliminary and final plat approval of H&H West Roads, a minor plat inside the city limits. Location, 716 North 102nd Street. Does anyone wish to have this removed from consent agenda? All right, seeing none. Agenda item number 12, case C10-19-29, applicant Lindsay Clements. It is on for approval. Request, rezoning from GI to NBD. Property is located within an ACI 1 overlay district. The location, 1256 South 13th Street. Does anyone wish to have this removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none. Agenda item number 14, case C11-19-30, applicant Clarity Development Company. It is on for approval. Request approval of a PUR planned unit redevelopment overlay district. Location, 1301 South 12th Street. Anyone wish to have this removed from consent? Seeing none. Agenda item number 15, case C11-81-168, applicant View House. It is on for approval. Request approval of a major amendment to a PUD planned unit development overlay district. Location, northeast of 27th and Cumming Street. Does anyone wish to have this removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'll move on. Finally, agenda item number 17, case C7-19-31, applicant St. Robert Bellarmine. It is on for layover. Request approval of a major amendment to a conditional use permit assumed to allow religious assembly in a R2 district. Location, 11900 Pacific Street. Does anyone wish to have this removed? All right. Seeing none, do we have a motion for the cases on consent for approval?
Make motion to approve case numbers 9, 11, 14, and 15, complete with the staff recommendations.
Wait a second. 12 is in there also, Dave?
Also add 12.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please record the vote?
Magid?
Yes.
Rosacker?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Carnes?
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
motion approved.
Okay. Do we have a motion for the cases on for layover?
I motion for layover of agenda item number 17.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, were you? Okay. Lisa, will you please record the vote?
Rosacker?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Carnes?
Yes.
Magid?
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
motion approved.
Okay, before we move on, those consent cases are done for the day. They've been moved on, taken off of the agenda. If you were here for one of those cases, you can stay if you want, or you are free to leave. Okay? The first 3 cases are administrative cases only. There will not be any opportunity for public testimony. Agenda item number 1 is case C10-5-144, C12-5-145. Applicant AVG CFM 204th and Q. attention J.F. Carter. Request final plat approval of Coventry, lots 111 through 117, and Outlot I, a subdivision outside the city limits with rezoning from AG to DR and MU. Location, northwest of 204th and Harrison Street. May we hear from the city, please?
Sure. This is a final plat request for what is Phase 6 of Coventry. It includes 7 mixed-use lots, 1 outlot for open space and drainage purposes, and associated right-of-way within a little over 13 acres. The final plat is consistent with the approved revised preliminary plat in Chapter 53 subdivisions of the Omaha Municipal Code. The department recommends approval of the rezoning from AG to DR and MU, subject to submittal of an acceptable minor amendment to the mixed-use development agreement. Approval of the final plat subject to addressing the 6 conditions listed in the recommendation report prior to forwarding this request to City Council.
Thank you, Eric. Any additional comments or questions from the board? Do we have a motion?
I move approval for the rezoning from AG to DR and MU, subject to the submittal of an acceptable minor amendment to the mixed-use development agreement, and approval of the final plat, subject to addressing the 6 items outlined in the recommendation report prior to forwarding this request to City Council.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please record the vote?
Pate,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Carnes,
Yes.
Magid,
Yes.
Rosacker,
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
motion approved.
Agenda item number 2, case C12-18-130. Applicant, Dragon Storage LLC. Request, final plat approval of Waterford Crossing replat 27, a subdivision outside the city limits. Location, northeast of 156th and Ida Streets. May we hear from the city?
Yeah, the preliminary plat for the Waterford Crossing replat 27 came before this planning board on the November 7th, 2018 meeting and was approved with conditions by the City Council on January 8th of 2019. The final plat is consistent with the approved preliminary plat, so the city recommends approval of the final plat subject to the conditions of preliminary plat approval and submittal of a final acceptable subdivision agreement prior to forwarding to City Council.
Thank you, Eric. Any questions, comments from the board? Do we have a motion?
Recommend approval of the final plat, subject to the conditions of preliminary plat approval and submittal of a final acceptable subdivision agreement prior to forwarding the request to the City Council.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please record the vote?
Morris,
Yes.
Carnes,
Yes.
Magid,
Yes.
Rosacker,
Yes.
Pate,
No.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
motion approved.
Okay, agenda item number 3, case C10-14-104, C12-14-105. Applicant, Anchor Point Development, LLC. Request final plat approval of Anchor Point Lot 303, a subdivision outside the city limits with rezoning from AG to MU. Location, northwest of 168th and Ida Streets. May we hear from the city?
So there have been 4 previous phases approved for the Anchor Point development, 3 of those being single-family residential and another one for an elementary school. So this 5th phase is the start of the mixed-use zoning. So only 1 lot, Lot 303, is before you for the final platting. There are a few items in regards to the mixed-use development agreement that will need to be worked out between staff and the applicant before proceeding to City Council. Specifically, there's a drive or an access lane that needs to be removed from a required buffer yard along the north side of the property, and then also some reciprocal access and driveways to this Lot 303 and one of the adjacent lots. That being said, the city is comfortable recommending approval of the rezoning from AG to MU, subject to submittal of an acceptable mixed-use development plan, and approval of the final plat subject to subject to addressing the 2 conditions in the recommendation report prior to City Council.
Thank you, Eric. Any questions, comments? Do we have a motion?
A motion for approval of the rezoning from AG to MU, subject to submittal of an acceptable mixed-use development plan and approval of the final plat, subject to meeting the 2 requirements in the recommendation report prior to forwarding the request to City Council.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please record the vote?
Carnes?
Yes.
Magid?
Yes.
Rosacker?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
motion approved.
That ends the administrative part of the agenda. We'll move on to agenda item number 4, case C8-18-281. Applicant Mark Sanford. Request approval of a special use permit to allow body and fender repair services in a GC district. Property is located in an ACI 2 overlay district. This was laid over from our December 5th meeting. Location 7076 Maple Street. May we hear from the applicant?
Good afternoon. I'm Mark Sanford. I'm representing the owners of Omaha Collision, who are attempting to clean up this existing site and get their fender and auto body repair shop. They currently have a building on the southern side of the lot, and they're requesting to make an addition so they can improve their service bays. We have 3 service bays. It's an existing piece of the existing building, which is going to be the estimating bay, which is required to have parking stalls associated with it. And there's 2 service bays within the addition and a parts area that'll be connected to the building. There will be a paint booth, and we're remodeling or anticipating to remodel the office area. We've revised the site plan to have all the parking stalls meet the requirements of 9 feet by 18 feet for standard size and 8 feet wide by 16 feet deep in a 20-foot drive aisle for the compact size. There are 5 compact size stalls, and that meets the requirement of the parking configurations. We also have a handicap stall, which did not meet in the previous submittals, but we've tried to clean this lot up and get every bit of usable space out of it. I know some of the buffers don't work as well, but it's a very tight site. The existing building was built within 3 feet of 1 foot of the existing lot line, but we backed the addition off a couple feet off the edge. It'll be easier for construction. And in the rear, a 5-foot buffer to the building itself. There is an existing abandoned alley of 20 feet wide, of which we deemed 10 feet of that to help with the buffer yard to the rear. Open to any questions and
So,
see if we can get it to comply.
Mark, a couple questions for you
Yes.
here. One is the paint booth there.
Yes.
How are they going to get in and out of that paint?
You know, this wall will be removed. I see that line is darkened, but that was
okay.
because I did some areas. But they will get into that from the new service bay area.
Okay.
Yeah, otherwise it's landlocked and they can't get in there. But yeah, we'll remove that wall.
Okay.
So is this, excuse me, Mark, is this a different plan than was submitted with the application?
It's slightly different than the one that was submitted because there was some question on the service bays. So I did delineate the 2 service bays that are inside the space, because they have 1 door into the addition that will come in and access both of the service bays in the paint booth area. This is the existing estimating bay, which is currently accessed off of Maple Street. And right now there's no buffer yard in the front. There's no trees. There's no landscaping. We're anticipating making the new drive, a remodeled drive. Right now it's got a temporary construction going on Maple Street. It's quite extensive. Remodel the drive aisle to be able to drive into the space and then get into the estimating bay through the west side. And then they'll back out and leave and go on Maple Street, which is a right in, right out only drive anyway. And then we'll develop a new walkway in front, which have a little retaining wall because this area, the front slopes off quite drastically, and we're going to build a retaining wall and get a existing entrance is located here with a new walkway on top.
Mark, when was this submitted to the planning department?
I sent the revised plan in just the other day after I received their comments.
Okay. In the pre-meeting, we had talked about this. The planning department really hasn't had time to look this new plot plan over.
Okay.
Or site plan, I should say. Okay. Any other questions for Mark? Okay. Are there any other proponents that wish to speak? Are there any opponents that wish to speak? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. Eric?
Sure. So yeah, so the plan in your packet is somewhat different than the one Mark just showed. We did receive this revised copy, I believe, yesterday, and have not had an opportunity to review that. Now, I still do see that there's an issue as far as the drive aisle, coming north from Maple Street, not meeting the 24 feet. Mark mentioned the buffer yard on the north side of the site. However, there's not a provision to reduce required perimeter parking lot landscaping. So because that's adjacent to residential, there's still a need for 10 feet of landscaping on the north side of those parking stalls. So that would bring that further down, as well as the west side probably needs 5 feet of perimeter landscaping. So there's still some issues. Part of the problem is the site is rather small, and when you're proposing an addition of this size, the planning department is skeptical that we're able to get the size addition that they are seeking along with all the regulations that come into it. And the site is within an ACI, area of civic importance overlay district, and for those corridors throughout our city, we try to bring sites into as much compliance as possible. While I appreciate the efforts to try to make improvements to the site, the planning department still views it as probably unlikely being able to meet all the regulations and fitting. Now, like I said, we have not had a chance to look specifically at the plan that's up on your screen. Our recommendation is for denial. I don't know if it's possible to remove, part of the existing building on the west side, the estimating bay, and have all of the business oriented to the west. You would be able to accommodate a drive aisle there, perhaps. I don't know if those changes, though, are in the interests of the applicant. So where we stand today, we have a recommendation for denial. If there's a desire for us to look at this new plan, that's fine, but I do notice that there are still issues that I don't think we can support waivers of at this time.
Okay. Any questions, comments? Do we have a motion?
I move to deny.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you record the vote, please?
Magid?
Yes.
Rosacker?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Carnes?
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
motion approved for denial.
Great, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Mark.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Agenda item number 5, case C3-19-23. Applicant, Planning Department, on behalf of the City of Omaha, request approval of the disposal of city-owned property under Community Development Law. Location, 3420 Boyd, 3408 Sailor Street, 4209 Allison Avenue, 4336 Camden Ave, 4522 Brown Street, 3311 Manderson Street, 3028 Pinckney Street, 3941 Blondo Street, 1706 North 36th Street, 3502 Hamilton Street, 1523 North 35th Street, and 3410 Seward Street. Eric, you're representing the city, okay?
Yes.
May we hear your city's recommendation, please?
Yeah, so this request is to dispose of these 12 properties totaling approximately 2.15 acres to the Omaha Municipal Land Bank for the future development of single-family residences. It is the policy of the city to surplus and dispose of unneeded public property and is consistent with the Nebraska statutes for community development law. I'll give my official
Okay.
recommendation after the public hearing.
Do we have any other proponents that wish to speak? Do we have any opponents? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Any additional questions, comments from the board? Eric, your recommendation?
Recommend approval.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please record the vote?
Rosacker,
Yes.
Pate,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Carnes,
Yes.
Magid,
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
motion approved.
Agenda item number 6, case C3-19-24, applicant, Planning Department on behalf of the City of Omaha, request approval of the disposal of city-owned property under Community Development Law. Location 3813 and 3818 Corby Street, 3916 Miami Street, 4339 and 4350 Lake Street, and 4143 Grant Street. Eric, you again representing the applicant?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so this request involves 6 parcels totaling a little less than 37,000 square feet in total area. For the future development of single-family residences, the disposal would be to Jesu Housing. Once again, this request follows state statutes and Nebraska Community Redevelopment Law.
Okay, are there any other proponents that wish to speak? Seeing none, are there any opponents? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Any additional comments, questions? Eric,
Recommend approval.
Move for approval?
Second.
we have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you record the vote, please?
Pate,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Carnes,
Yes.
Magid,
Yes.
Rosacker,
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
motion approved.
Agenda item number 7, case C10-19-006, C12-19-007. Applicant A1 Development requests preliminary plat approval of Lake Cunningham Village, a cluster subdivision outside the city limits with rezoning from DR to R5. Location southeast of 96th and State Streets. Larry, you representing the applicant?
Thank you.
Okay.
11440 West Center Road, appearing on behalf of the applicant A1 Development. We have representatives of A1 Development here as well to answer any questions that you might have, but I also have Joe Foley of SEH, the consulting engineers on this particular project. Just start off, obviously, we're seeking recommendations of the preliminary plat and also rezoning from DR to R5. As you can see, this is the southeast corner. I get a pen out. Southeast corner of 96th and State Street, and it's currently undeveloped, being farmed. To the north, there's an acreage development. To the east is ag and I-680. Also to the south is I-680. To the west is a little bit of everything, a little residential, a little industrial, and ag as well. The development proposal, back that up a little bit, calls for 229 single-family detached residential houses. They're primarily throughout the entire development, and the average price of these will be about $250,000 a piece. And then there are 19 villa or town home style units in the southwest side of the development, and there's 19 of those. Those will have an average price of about $150,000 a piece. There's also, as you note, there's about 18 different outlots throughout this subdivision, primarily for open space and drainage. There's a pedestrian trail that cuts through the development at this location and will eventually make its way up to State Street in the north and connect and have a pedestrian connection. This is Lake Cunningham up here on the north, so there will be pedestrian access to the Lake Cunningham area. The total density is 4 units per acre. The future land use map and master plan of the City of Omaha calls for this to be low density residential. Obviously 4 units per acre is very low density residential. As far as the public improvements, there we did revise already. You notice the preliminary plat. One of the comments was to provide access to the property, adjacent property to the east when and if it develops. It may never develop. It could be held forever. But we did change the site plan already to include that particular access point. It'll have a turnaround. You notice there's a substantial amount of green space throughout the development. There's about 80 feet in many of the locations along the eastern boundary of the property before you get to the actual platted lots. There's detention basins throughout the development as well. As far as public improvements, that will be improving both State Street and 96th Street to a 3-lane section along the frontage, except for the north and west corner of State and also 96th Street. And the reason for that is that that's a future county project for the intersection, and that will be done at a later time. There will be sidewalks installed from all along 96th Street, all along State Street. The applicant has reached out and met individually with the surrounding neighbors and property owners, and so we've done that as well. We appreciate the recommendation report of the planning department, find the same acceptable, and here to answer any questions. And obviously this was on consent agenda for approval, so I guess we'll listen to what the opponents have to say, and we'll address any comments that they raise or concerns that they raise. So with that, happy to answer any questions.
Larry, are the public improvements going to be done within an SID?
Yes, this is a sanitary
And you've got
improvement.
SID approval already?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, well, they're doing the analysis right now, but the numbers appear to work
They're
just
working?
fine. Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Any additional comments or questions for Larry? All right, are there any other proponents that wish to speak? Seeing none, we'll hear from opponents that wish to speak. Come forward, give your name and address, please.
My name is Robert Ricks. I live 8125 North 96th Street. My home is the only home located on this land being proposed for development. This subdivision coming into our neighborhood around our house, it's going to wreck the valuation of our home. We've been making mortgage payments on our house for almost 20 years now on that same house. You know, if you guys were to get out in your public vehicles and go out there to North 96th Street, start at Irvington Road, and go all the way north up to the Washington County line, it is all made up of acreages on both sides of the road. That's what defines our section of North 96th Street. If this subdivision were to come in here, what it's going to do, it's going to wreck the landscape of the neighborhood. We don't want this in our neighborhood.
Is your house the one, there's a
Yeah.
little notch carved out of this? That's your
That's your-
property?
James M. Smart is my late father-in-law. He actually purchased the home for a short period of time until we sold our old home in town, and then we took over the mortgage on it.
So James is your
Late
Wow.
father-in-law.
late father-in-law?
Yeah, so the map isn't current.
But that's where you live, is right? That notch, right?
Right.
Okay, and then all
My
that land.
mother-in-law who was here, she lives on the northeast corner of 96th and State Street. Her name is Lorraine Smart.
Okay. Well, I guess my question is, what did you figure would happen to this land someday as far as development?
Well, you know, it's been agriculture for as long as we've been there, and we're hoping it was gonna stay that way.
Okay.
Like I said, if you were to go out there and drive up North 96th Street, I mean, these aren't some rinky-dink homes out there. I mean, there's some nice homes out there. And like I said, bringing in starter homes, I don't want starter homes wrapped around my house, and I'm sure neither would you guys if you lived out there. You know, there's nice homes out there, and I'd like to keep the scenery the way it is right now.
I'm just running a quick, do you know how big your lot is out there?
That map isn't right. The lot is 150 by 150. I think it's like 0.52 acres.
So you're not quite an acre out there?
It's a little over half an acre, right? But my wife and I, we've been living there since '99 with our two boys, and we've been making mortgage payments on it for almost 20 years. And if this goes in, I mean, we're going to lose money on our home. And it's a nice house.
Were you offered any money as part of this development? Did the developers ask if you wanted to
No.
sell?
No.
Really?
Robert, you did meet with the developers, though?
I was not at home. I was at work. I worked for Landhaw Nurseries. My wife, she was at work, but he did come around and he talked to my oldest boy who was I think mowing the yard at the time.
Okay. Did you reach out to developer after they contacted and talked to your
No,
son?
we knew this hearing was gonna be coming, probably the first of the year. I think it was last fall when they came around, I believe. But like I said, we knew this hearing was coming, and we're just kind of, you know, just sitting tight, see how this thing's gonna play out.
Okay. All right, thank you, Robert.
Thanks.
Any other opponents that wish to speak?
Paul Winningoff, 6707 Winningoff Road. I am a shareholder and manager of Winningoff Enterprises LLC, which is the adjoining landowner to the east, down the hill. A week ago, I met with Joe, the project manager. I reached out. He responded very quickly. Thank you for that. And we had a very open and honest, candid conversation. There's genuine concerns. Our family spent a lifetime, we're multi-generation on that end of the county, so there's concerns of the soil, how to handle water, all the factors that comes in. Anytime you touch the limited amount of topsoil we have, underneath we'll have either what we call sugar clay, which is very tough to manage, even through construction, let alone afterwards when it's existing structures. So there's great concerns looking at the projections, and I get it. We talk 60-some acres of land. We talk approximately 40 acres developed, and the rest is open spaces. But to take significant rains, and I'm not talking about the 1 in 100-year storm, I'm talking a couple of inches in an hour, which is a very reasonable thing to expect in our climate. To handle that water, we have issues already coming off of that property, which has been very aggressively farmed in a no-till, best conservation manner. In reviewing the grading plans, they're gonna take part of the hill down. So if we go down 10 to 15 feet, there's an adjustment there. I have deep concerns about the water coming off of the break point east towards our property and how they're gonna handle it. Our family business, we are not corn and soybean farmers. We grow produce, and we have a retail business. We've been around for 65 plus years, okay? I live a mile away from this property. So what we're dealing with when there's issues is not a low value crop. We do a high intensity crop. I have concerns down the road with problems and handling them. And I currently have housing adjoining me where I live in the corner of Winninghoff and Sorensen. And we've had issues, and we continue to have issues as things happen in the neighborhood. Obviously, there's uncontrollable weather situations, and you have to deal with it. But when you have utilities and other things, and the topography changes, it changes how things act. The other type of soil we have is a glacial till. And our hills have that, and that very well may have that. We experience it on our property, and that has a different way of handling the water. So the concerns is not only the surface water, but retaining it and then having it slowly disperse through the soils. So we have those issues to deal with. The next thing would be is how to keep people out. As we increase the amount of people joining us, we have people who like to take a walk and shop. And come on. And so we've discussed fencing, and there's been an open discussion about that. To the bigger concerns is safety. We're adding potentially 250 plus units. No, they're not all going to dump out on State Street, but there is going to be full egress directly west of our property line on the current plan. So we add that to the additional traffic. We have a seasonal peak period, spring till early winter with the lake, and we've had that for many years, okay? But as development moves west towards the Bennington, closing in that, so envision going out State Street, I can guarantee you the traffic flow, especially in the commuting times, in the AM and the PM, is significantly increased. I don't know if any of you have taken the time to come out and see the specific property we're talking and the topography, but we have a fairly aggressive hill on State Street, and people tend to exceed the speed limit. So there's genuine safety concerns, not only for anybody who would be buying into this property and having their house, but the existing neighborhood. And that needs to be thoroughly addressed. I understand putting a turn lane, that's good for in and out of that, but the rest of the strip going east towards the interstate at 72nd Street is still a county 2-lane asphalt, and it's narrow. So there's great concerns there, and yes, there may be some project in the county to do something with that down the future. But what kind of time frame are we on that, and how genuine is that? So not only is there for those people who may potentially buy in this development, but there's also our family, our employees, and the existing people, and the people going to Cunningham Lake and enjoying it. So there's a great safety concern moving forward with the additional traffic that we're experiencing on our end of the county. If you're to look to springboard off of Mr. Ricks, if you start directly north of this proposal, that's what it is, it's acreages. 5 and 10 and up acres per unit. And that's, at one point, that was being told the vision for the county going north of the interstate. I think this would be in direct conflict with that. I personally have reservations about the high density. I understand in hearing the proposal and the four units per acre and then all the green space. But, you know, there comes a time, proposals are great, plans are great, and the real world can be different. And my experiences in our end of the county and with the developments, and that's having developments to existing property lines, we have more issues than we have benefits. If anyone is concerned, and for their representation, sir, the property directly east that our family owns, for the record, has very limited potential development. Okay, the main reason for that is Lake Cunningham. There is a federal easement on that property, as long as that lake exists, for the spillway. If you go to Lake Cunningham and you go to the boat ramp, you'll go, nice boat ramp, but the reason that lake is designed and built that way is if we get an excessive amount of water, that lake, to hold the dam, has a spillway, and that spillway will empty out and go across our property. So potentially, there's very limited acres of the parcel we're talking about that I own that is developable. So yes, it probably will stay ag land for quite some time. Obviously, our family is to continue doing what we do. And we're a part of the community, and as the community surrounds us, we try to make as much adapting and keep everything in mind to do what we do, to stay in business, and to be good neighbors. So,
Paul, can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
On that? So you've been in that area for quite some time, obviously, and you've known this property was there. Have you made any attempt to purchase the property yourself?
yes, I made an attempt in the last year to purchase that property,
Okay, and what happened?
and I made an offer. It was less than their asking price, and straight up, the agent representing the family never returned my calls.
Okay. Because that would have been one of the solutions.
And
An
trust me,
an
it very
expensive one for
much,
you,
it
but-
very much was on the radar to do. Now, unfortunately, and I don't want to say something wrong and upset people, but the reality in our end of community, if you were to drive by our property, there are 5 center pivots. As I stand in this room and in front of this board, I can tell you in the years that those pivots have been there, fortunately in the last 4 to 5 years, this has not reoccurred, but in a period of 3 years, I had 13 different occasions where those pivots were vandalized. And it took over $100,000 to put them back together and keep functioning.
On your property?
On our property. People would come in and steal the copper, okay? I mean, I wish they would have just come and had the gun or the knife and said, Paul, give me $400, I need a hit, you know? It would have been cheaper than what we've gone through. Those are the types of things we experience. If I was to leave it on from the attorney's aspect, sir, that's premeditated, and I'll go to prison for a lot longer than the person who steals the copper. That's the facts of our society. So we have those kinds of issues.
Who owned this property when you made the offer then?
The Jacobson family.
And is that who sold the property to the developer?
I believe that is.
Okay.
The Jacobson family, my understanding, the older generation who are 70s and 80s, they were just looking to resolve among the brothers and sisters.
So, obviously, it's a nice piece of ground, nice parcel there. Obviously, it's got some challenges to it. And you said it's used for ag purposes right now?
Currently,
But
yes.
didn't you say there was clay?
It's various clays. We have what we call a sugar clay that is beneath the topsoil. And it just envision that you took a cup of sugar and you poured water or milk and just watch it flow away. That's what happens if it's not properly managed. If you look at our farm, we have very aggressive terracing to stop erosion issues and control it.
Yours is directly to the east?
We lie directly to the east.
Yeah, I see that terracing on the map I'm looking at.
As far as me, personally, I understand they've bought the land and they have visions and would like to develop it. I'm not against that, okay? What I'm against is the density and the volume it is. If they were to come back with a plan and say, we would envision a quarter of those houses and break it up into larger lots or an acre or that kind of thing, then let's sit down and talk about it. And it may be something that fits into our community, what existingly we have. I don't know anybody that wants to go in reverse. And the reality at the end of the day is, it very well could affect values. I mean,
Yeah, you know, you look at these developments, so, and there's a lot of green space in this development, more so than I've seen in a lot of residential developments.
Absolutely.
Over the years, and I think that's a plus to the area.
Look across the street.
Yeah. So it could have been more highly dense. It could have been developed more highly dense than it's shown right now, because it is low density. So I think all things considered, as a residential development, with all the green space and the trails possibly that are coming in on this too, I think it's decent for the neighborhood. I think it's gonna be great for the neighborhood. I understand your challenges there that you're facing, but
Alternatively, you have a retail store right there, right?
we are where I live, at the corner of Wenninghoff Road and Sorensen Parkway.
Yeah.
And this is how the neighborhood is. As was reported in the news media within the last year, we are one of the high-risk intersections. We have a lot of accidents.
But you also want customers to your retail establishment.
There are those benefits, no question. No question. I mean, what we do in fresh produce, it's good for everybody should eat it. You'll just be healthier. You know, and our family, we're at about 65 years of direct off-farm retail. So we're established. It's not something doesn't have much history. And our youngest son is actively stepped up and engaged, and that'll be the next generation. He sees that as his future. And all I want is, how do we work together to find a good solution with the best outcome for every party involved? And as I stand here and I see that kind of housing, because I live next to it, between where I live and Northwest High School, I drive past it going to what we call the North Garden, or the north side of 680, and I see it, I live it. You know, I guess, I don't know what the easy answer is.
Do you know the developer?
Of this,
Is A1?
I've met, the gentleman stopped last fall with like a proposal, kind of a layout, a plat of what originally, and this would have been probably October, November of 2018. And they introduced themselves. I mean, that was nice of them to do that. And what we see today is somewhat changed. That's a fair statement, as far as some of the things are moved. Because yes, there is a gas pipeline. It sits on their side of the fence line, and so I believe we're at leaving 80 foot untouched because of that gas line. It's a live, active gas line.
I see what you're saying. I mean, there's a lot of green space for most of the developments in that area that have turned into neighborhoods. But I wish there'd be more communication between the developer and, Larry, are you with the developer right now? Is that, would you like to come up?
We'll give Larry
He'll get a chance.
he'll get a chance once so that we're done with the opponents.
All right.
And the project manager was very responsive when I called him. And I mean, I've been down here before on other issues, and the reason I didn't rush out sooner is, until you see it come up in front of this board, who knows what's really gonna happen? And it can come up in front of this board, and then it can be done. It can be approved or denied. You know, I guess my ask is, as we stand here and what's proposed, I would respectfully ask this board to deny what they're proposing, and let's go back and revisit.
Okay, thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Are there any other opponents that wish to speak? Please give your name and address.
Mr. Chairman, Board, my name is Richard McCauley. I live 1,000 feet to the north of the proposed development. Address is 8707 North 96th Street. The reason that we're opposed is because we had no communication with the developer, no knowledge of this plan, no knowledge of the sewer district, no nothing. The same goes with my neighbor to the south of me. This development, we're not opposed to starter housing. We're not opposed to farmers selling land for their retirement. We're not opposed necessarily to zoning changes. What we're opposed of is what I want to call the lack of communication in this development. And also some of the abilities of people like us. And I want to tell you, there's less than 20 houses within a quarter mile of not letting us know the impact that these houses might have. What you're looking to put on 66 acres here is possibly 1,000 people and 500 cars in essentially a rural or barely suburban area. With young children in our house, I need to know what the traffic is going to be like. I need to know what the sewer improvement district is going to be like. I looked at the green space, and my family, before I came out here, is involved in real estate development, and we have all sorts of questions about the viability of this plat, starting with the settlement ponds. Are they going to be actively managed? Are they going to be dead water space that breed mosquitoes and larvae and possibly West Nile? Sewer development, where does the sanitary sewer look for, and does it really have the capacity, again, for 1,000 people? Because that's what you're putting here. The rural roads are just that rural. If you head south and then east along State Street, 96th Street, you'll find that they narrow considerably, and every time the county repaves it, every few years, they start to split off, and they require maintenance, and they have potholes, sometimes extensively. We don't know what's going to happen, again, with 500 cars possibly exiting every day, either going down to 72nd Street or north to Irvington Road and on to 680. If you look on Irvington Road, the backups to 680 in the morning. In the afternoon, the backups are long, sometimes as long as 15 minutes to get on 680. What will 1,000 people do? If the developer had been up front with myself and my neighbors, some of which are here today, we probably could have worked together to have an acceptable development, because again, we're not opposed for it. But again, I question the plat and the green space and whether it's really doable. And also, there's a deception. You're looking at 4 houses per acre is low density. But in realistic, in this plat, that's not true. You're looking at about 5,000 square feet on the average, some of which is considerably smaller, where you're putting a house. And I also question whether you're going to get $250,000 in a house that's on a plat that's under 5,000 square feet. Starter homes are fine, starter homes are great, but the density that you're putting on a rural road without the infrastructure, both north, south, east, and west, is questionable, especially without neighborhood input. And we've been home since this, I gather, started to develop in November and December, and no one has made any attempt to touch anything outside of the 300-foot range of the house. Well, in this area, if you go by it, you'll find that 300 feet doesn't even cover my driveway. A little attempt by the developer to talk to us, especially since when we bought our house in 2008, this was zoned for 5 acres that was going to be residential development, might have been welcome. And I know I speak for my next door neighbor who is not here right now, because we were notified of this hearing last night at about 8 o'clock when we opened a mail from one of our neighbors. So that's why we're here without any ability to call the developer or the representative of the developers. What I'm asking you to do is either table it or deny it so that we can work together to come up with an acceptable solution that makes profit for everybody. Because yes, it would be nice to have neighbors. It'd be nice to have a playground. It'd be nice to have a pond within walking distance. It'd be nice to have bike riding for my daughter. But this is not the answer right now without working together as a community.
Thank you, Richard.
Thanks.
Any other opponents?
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Franco. I live at 8920 North 96th Street. I am a quarter of a mile north of the intersection. There is a single house between me and the intersection, which would be the start of this neighborhood. I don't know how many of you have been out there, but this is a very quiet, picturesque, pastoral neighborhood. These are acreages. And so bringing in what appears to be fairly high density housing does change the nature of our neighborhood. I know it looks like there's quite a bit of green space there, but the lots are very small. And the green space is the bottom of the embankments, the ravines, and the gullies. That's what they're using for the green space. So they're going to put the lots in the streets on the tops, the crests of the ridges and the hills. I personally wouldn't mind a neighborhood coming in, tiny knots and high density with gullies between the streets doesn't make sense. So I speak on behalf of my wife and my children who've been out there for 20 years. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mark. Any other opponents that wish to speak? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. Larry, I'd like to call you back up and you can address the issues that have been brought up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the board, Larry Jobin, 11440 West Center Road, appearing on behalf of the applicant. As we discussed earlier, obviously, the future land use map and the master plan calls for this to be low-density residential housing in the City of Omaha's master plan. Low density is actually 15 units or less per acre. We're at 4 units per acre. So this is actually extremely low-density residential housing. And we believe, good for the neighborhood. While it's not very dense and there's a lot of green spaces, it is dense enough to improve the public infrastructure of State Street and 92nd or 96th Street to 3-lane roadway sections. So we're required to comply with all the requirements of the Public Works Department as far as the infrastructure. We're also required to comply with all post-construction stormwater management policies by retaining the first half-inch of water and not having any net increase in the water flow onto adjacent properties. Obviously, we have to do that. There's a detention basin shown here, and there's about 80 feet between the lots and the property line that is currently being farmed for ag. It will actually no longer be agricultural uses, obviously, so there'll be native and natural grasses planted in that 85 feet between the lots and the actual property line. So I think what you'll see is probably better stabilization from an erosion standpoint and water control standpoint. And I think with respect to Mr. Wenninghoff, and I appreciate him, I mean, what I think he did say is that they did reach out to him in October, November last year, so that was prior to us even actually applying for this particular preliminary plat and rezoning. And we met with the Planning Department, Public Works Department a couple times to make sure that we had what we thought was a nice development for this particular area. Well, it's interesting, they may be starter homes, but they're $250,000 each, so and then the townhomes are $150,000 each. So I guess if you call them starter homes, the starter homes have certainly elevated in price. As far as reaching out to people 1,000 feet away, that all of a sudden becomes pretty burdensome. Obviously, the state law and what the city follows is a 300-foot rule. I think the developer was conscious about that and did reach out to all the surrounding neighborhood and owners of property right around them. And my understanding is, with respect to this gentleman, is that they did stop by and they left some contact information with him, but no one ever called him back. Now, what we did do on this particular lot, or this house that sits here right now, is we did design the subdivision. So if and when he would ever want to sell, if he would want to sell to someone, they could make that connection back, because ultimately the access onto 96th Street isn't optimal from a public works perspective. It's a 3-lane section. 96th Street as well as State Street are arterial streets. that are designed to carry a large amount of traffic. We did design this. We created 2 outlots on the back for open space. And then so ultimately, if they do sell this property, someone could rejoin this particular neighborhood by subdividing that property and making the access onto this interior street. So we did keep that in mind moving forward. Happy to talk to them after this meeting to see if there's any interest on the developer's part or their part. We're not asking them to move. Their single-family residential purpose is essentially identical to the single-family residential uses that are going to be platted adjacent to them. So I don't think we're changing the character of the area, except for we're adding more homes, obviously. The only other thing I would just point out is, again, the property is surrounded by 2 arterial streets, State Street and 96th Street, and it's got a large frontage along I-680. So we think this is an appropriate change of zone, appropriate development for this particular property, obviously consistent with the master plan. And again, we appreciate the recommendation of the planning department and would request the recommendation of approval from this board. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. I think I addressed everything that I needed to.
Stormwater, did you address stormwater runoff?
Yes, stormwater runoff, again, yeah, because remember, we have to comply with all the post-construction stormwater policies of the city of Omaha. We have to have no net increase in the water runoff onto adjacent properties. We have to detain the first half inch. We've got a detention basin here. Actually, a lot of these outlots throughout here are all related to stormwater detention. And then, as you can see, with 4 units per acre, you have a tremendous amount of green space, and then you have some natural features that you can see here that won't be disturbed on this aerial photograph. You've got this area in here. So obviously the idea is to maintain control and of the water and quality of the water as it runs off the site. There is 85 feet of green space between the back of the lots and the property line to also deal with stormwater runoff. And again, that's going to be planted with native grasses, and it will be an additional absorption of stormwater as it runs off. The site does fall about 45 feet from this point to this point, but overall, it falls about 100 feet from State Street down to the southern boundary of the property. So the fact that there's a lot of green space here is a good thing with respect to post-construction stormwater management.
Larry, what was the rationale for not trying to acquire that land to include in the entire development from day one?
Oh, I think they reached out to him and they left their contact information, but no one got back with them. So they tried to make contact with them. We just we couldn't get a hold of them, from what I understand, talking to the developer. I asked them that specifically. That doesn't mean we can't continue to talk with them. But again, the idea was, and we're not forcing anyone to sell. I mean, they still have access onto 96th Street. They can still use their property as they do today. They just are going to have neighbors. But if they ever want to sell and the Public Works Department would like to restrict their access onto 96th Street, then we made accommodations for them to have access onto the interior street. So we did think about their property in designing this development.
Okay, any other questions or comments for Larry? Okay, thank you, Larry.
Thank you.
Eric, may we hear from the city?
Sure. And I think it's important to point out that this area south of State Street is in what's called the present development zone. To the north of State is future development zone. When it's in the present development zone, a property can be developed provided the infrastructure can be provided that's necessary, meaning sewers, extension of sewers, putting in street improvements, internal street network, and all of those items. The master plan does call for low-density residential, which is up to the R5 zoning district, which could allow up to 14.5 units per acre. So the proposed low-density residential is compliant with the master plan, with the present development zone. It should be noted, it is a cluster subdivision. Part of a cluster subdivision is to produce innovative environments, provide for more efficient use of land, protect topographical features, and permit common open space. We do believe the proposed development does fit those requirements quite nicely. I don't know if you want me to address any other specific items. We do have Public Works here. If you do have any traffic questions, there are arterial street improvements that are required with this development. We are requiring a second stub street to the property on the east if that were ever to develop. Obviously, Mr. Wenninghoff indicated there wasn't any, time frame for something like that to happen, but that is one of the conditions that we would have.
That's not showing yet, is it?
He showed
Not
that
on your
in an updated
document,
one.
but,
Okay.
this is a preliminary plat, which means that the preliminary plat would have to move to city council. They would have to address the conditions in the recommendation report, make some modifications based on those, and then it could come back in for a final plat at a future time. So unless you have any other questions, the city is recommending approval of the rezoning from DR to R5 and approval of the preliminary plat subject to the 23 conditions listed in your recommendation report prior to submittal of a final plat.
Okay, any comments or questions from the board? Do we have a motion?
I move approval of the rezoning from DR to R5 and approval of the preliminary plat subject to the 23 conditions outlined in the recommendation report prior to submittal to the final plat.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please record the vote?
Morris,
Yes.
Carnes,
Yes.
Magid,
Yes.
Rosacker,
Yes.
Pate,
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
motion approved.
Agenda item number 8, case C10-17-46, C12-17-47, applicant 180 Maple LLC, request revised preliminary plat approval of Antler View East, a subdivision outside the city limits with rezoning from AG and R4 to DR, R4, and MU, and final plat approval of Antler View East, lots 1 through 11, and outlots A through C, a subdivision outside the city limits with rezoning from AG and R4 to DR, R4, and MU. Location, southwest of 180th Street and West Maple Road. May we hear from the applicant, please?
Doug Kellner with TD2, 10836 Old Mill Road, here on behalf of the applicant. We agree with planning's comments and request an approval.
Okay. Any other proponents that wish to speak? Are there any opponents that wish to speak? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Eric?
Yeah, so this request is for revised preliminary plat and then final plat of the first phase. Anytime we have a split recommendation of approval and a layover, we're not able to put that on the consent agenda. There are a few items that we need to work with the applicant on in the reasoning for the layover of the final plat. Specifically, Lot 10, currently the proposed retail building for that site backs up to the parkway on the south, and usually we do not allow structures to back onto a parkway or a boulevard. However, considering the distance between that actual right-of-way and the proposed building, we believe that planning, parks, and city staff believes that an acceptable solution would be to place an outlot along the north side of the parkway and heavily landscape and berm that. So we want the applicant to be able to work with parks and planning on finalizing those plans and creating that outlot. There's already proposed open space in that area, so it shouldn't impact their plans or their parking lot very much. A second item is the submitted wetlands reports. There are nearly 3 acres of wetlands on the site, as well as 2 channels. There's a large area of wetlands on the west portion of the site that it mostly encapsulates those wetlands. However, there's a small portion that is not included. So we either need a final mitigation plan to account for those wetlands or to enlarge that outlot. Staff recommends approval of the rezoning from AG to DR, R4, and MU, subject to submittal of an acceptable mixed-use district development agreement prior to forwarding the request to City Council. Approval of the revised preliminary plat, subject to the 33 conditions listed in the recommendation report. And lay over the final plat of Antler View East, lots 1 through 11, outlots A through C, to address conditions of the revised preliminary plat approval, including submittal of a final wetland analysis, and to provide an outlot with acceptable screening along the south side of Lot 10, adjacent to the parkway.
Any questions or comments? Do we have a motion?
I move for approval of the rezoning from AG to DR, R4, and MU, subject to submittal of an acceptable mixed-use district development agreement prior to forwarding the request to City Council. Approval of the revised preliminary plat, subject to the 33 conditions being addressed, subject to addressing those with the final plat submittal, and lay over the final plat of Antler View East, lots 1 through 11, outlots A through C, to address conditions of the revised preliminary plat approval, including submittal of a final wetland analysis and mitigation plan if necessary, and to provide an outlot with acceptable screening along the south side of Lot 10 adjacent to the parkway.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you record the vote, please?
Carnes?
Yes.
Magid?
Yes.
Rosacker?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
motion approved.
Moving on, agenda item number 10, case C10-19-26, C12-19-27. Applicant Douglas County School District 0001, Mark Warnicki. Request preliminary plat approval of OPS Pine Creek Addition, a subdivision outside the city limits with rezoning from AG to R4. Location, northwest of 156th and Ida Streets. May we hear from the applicant, please?
Hello, Joe Zadina with Lamper Nearson Associates, 14710 West Dodge, here on behalf of Omaha Public Schools. Here to answer any questions. This is obviously the preliminary plat. Just want to state that the land was purchased as part of the OPS 2014 bond. The recent 2018 bond is what implements the improvements of this high school. We've met with the city staff back in 2017, late last year in 2018, and then again early in January of 2019. We have no objections to the recommendations and requirements listed on the report from the planning board.
Hey, Joe, was is the bond money just to purchase the land or to build the school too?
So initially in 2014, the bond was to just acquire the land, and then 2018 bond passed to start to build the schools.
Okay,
Yes.
so they've got the funds available.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any other proponents that wish to speak? Any opponents? Come forward, give your name and address, please.
Good afternoon, Shad Gray, 7133 North 160th Avenue, Pine Creek, Lot 583. Just for clarification, you read that as AG to R4. It is AG to R5, correct?
Yep.
Okay. My points. First and foremost, we'd like to address property value. The houses that will border this piece of land, minimum of $300,000, upwards close to $400,000. With a school within, as the proposed plan that they put out on the news, we'll place the school within 30 feet, the parking lot within 30 feet of my lot line, which, you know, kids coming in and out, 1,000 cars, radio's blaring, I'll never be able to sell my house. Property value will plummet. Researching other houses along major school districts, Millard West, Northwest, the houses take much longer to sell than the houses across the street. They are not abiding for a big enough easement, I don't believe, between the school and the houses. Noise pollution will be an issue. We're talking about bands, football games, etc. Light pollution, they will have lights running late at night. We'll go from a very quiet neighborhood to a very, very noisy neighborhood. When we purchased our house, we talked with the person who owned the land behind us, who said he would take that land to his grave. It was going to remain agriculture, but unfortunately he was forced out by the school district. Traffic will be a big issue. You notice they've stubbed in from Vane Street into the school district, into the high school. Vane Street is a very quiet street. It will not be able to handle traffic. I know their intention is Ida and 156 will handle most of that traffic, but if you put a road there, the kids will use it. They will cut through. 162nd and Vane Street is a blind hill, and we have close to enough accidents as it is, near misses. I believe if we increase that traffic there, we will have a lot of problems. That is a 25-foot road. It cannot handle the traffic. Sorry, my notes keep going off. The other issue I had is going to be water runoff. This is a very sloping property. In order to build the high school here, they're going to have to take down a lot of dirt. And we are going to have it on a heavy rain year. This corner down here is a lake. It is all the water runoff from the entire Pine Creek South End neighborhood. I don't know what they've addressed as far as how to deal with that water, where they're going to move it to. But I get enough, my sump runs 24/7 during the spring as it is. I don't need any additional. Okay. Anyway, thank you. I would request, if not denial, great modification to the existing.
Chad, you made a comment about putting a school where you have homes and they're going to back up against that. Mm-hmm. Most of the high schools I can think of offhand back up to neighborhoods. I don't know where you go to where you're not going to be backing up to a neighborhood.
You will back up to a neighborhood at some point, but my point is to give enough of an easement, enough of green space to make it not my backyard. As their plan had showed, the parking lot would be extremely close to my fence line. I know with talking with people who live around other high schools, the kids will cut through their yard. They will jump their fence. We've got a couple people with pools that back up to that. I have a feeling they'll be using those pools when they're not supposed to be. It's, like I said, it's a lot of traffic and a lot of kids that we're not expecting. Also, this is, I know they keep saying school, they're also planning on a YMCA, which would make this a 7-day-a-week, 365 usage, not summers being lighter. It will be people using it all the time, and not just high school kids, but the public running in and out of there.
As I'm looking at the site plan, and Eric's going to check, but it looks like there's pretty good green space between the parking lots and the homes as it is, but he'll check and get a distance here.
If you verify that again, we didn't have exact measurements on what they put in the paper. So we're worried about that lot line. We're also worried about what they're going to do for barrier, whether it be trees or what, to separate the property from the actual building.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other opponents that wish to speak?
Bob Schwartz. I live at 7417 North 160th Street. Our concerns are this up here, where this street stops right here, and this putting a street in here, and also, as the other gentleman mentioned, connecting this street here. Our understanding is that there would be no connections into the neighborhood when the school was built. The second thing is that, and this is more a question of how the development would go forward. All these backyards were right here. All these backyards have large pine trees, like a tree barrier, just outside of the lot line. So I had a question of whether they would be removing those trees. I sent an email to the planning director, the planning guy who sent this out. He said he had no idea what that was. So I'm wondering when there will be, if it goes ahead, when they will start deciding on how to deal with things like that.
Okay.
That's what I had.
All right. Thank you, Bob.
All right.
Any other opponents that wish to speak? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. Joe, did you want to come up and address
Yeah, it's okay.
some of the, yeah.
Certainly. So, I guess I'll start with the first one. For the second gentleman, the trees he's referring to, they are intended to stay, though they are on the school district's property and they have the right to remove them. We didn't need to remove them. We could allow them to stay and grade away from those trees. So that stretch of trees adjacent to the homes along 160th Street, we actually just completed a plan yesterday for a tree removal plan because there's a lot of trees on this property. And those adjacent to those houses are to remain, except in that the Hanover Street extension as needed to build the road.
So that serves as a buffer.
Correct.
Against the residential property too. then?
Correct.
Yeah, that's good.
Perhaps the other couple of points, I think they're intending to generally fence their athletic facilities from a security standpoint on that far west side. I think we would rather prefer to landscape that area. It's approximately 100 feet to that service road, from the property line to the service road, and even a little bit further till you actually enter into the parking. So the dimension from the gentleman's home to or even any home along that side to the road is approximately 100 feet, and then again, the parking ends up being a little bit further in from there. But we do intend to probably not fence that, but rather just landscape that area. And then I quickly marked up on my exhibit the intention for the stormwater management and the different drainage areas as the site is graded. There's about 75 feet of fall across this site from the ridge down to 156th and Ida. And there'll be some significant grading. I think we're going to cut about 20 feet off the hill in order to set the finished floor of the new high school building. And then a lot of, I think Ryan maybe could speak to it, is the connectivity as required by the city for the street networks. So we've coordinated as much as we can. I think the school district also has caution against connectivity into the neighborhoods. That's why we were happy to see Girard Street as a cul-de-sac. Hanover would be a roadway on the far northwest to nothing at this point in time, because that furthest north lot the school district does not own. And then Vane Street, as quickly as we could come out of the neighborhood and connect down to 159th Street was our intention. And this corner lot number 3 will remain. I had a neighbor call concerned about the trees there, and that entire area remains trees as is. Perhaps as an outdoor science center for the school district, they have no intention of removing those trees at this time. So, but if Ryan wanted to add to it, but I think we did coordinate pretty heavily on these accesses. So,
You know how many students they're projecting to, at maximum, they're projecting?
1,500.
1,500?
Yep.
So, okay, fairly medium-sized high
Mhm.
school then. And
Correct.
parking, brought this up at a pre-meeting, the parking is adequate for that many students?
Yes, we have approximately 800 stalls for the high school, which far exceeds the code, but you have to consider, different permits for younger students, and also just that you can never have enough parking for events and other things. Additionally, there's about 125 stalls, and as much as I can say, for planning for the YMCA as a separate use. So approximately 925 total stalls on site. And then the chevron shape is for the 40 buses for the kids for busing as a separate parking lot.
The landscaping in that 100-foot buffer area between the service road and the residential lots, maybe too early to ask, but your landscaping going to be trees, shrubs, a combination? What are you planning on?
I would expect that to be it's a pretty wide space, so lawn and trees is what I see. The headlights won't be directed at that. I mean, if we're adjacent to resident, as code requires, we will certainly screen any headlights from parking lots with hedges or other things. But I think along that strip, I envision trees, and I do think the grade also slopes down to our site from that edge. It's kind of a ridge line there, but I could be, I don't have the grading plan in front of me at the moment.
Okay. All right, are there any other questions or comments from the board? Eric?
Sure. So before us today is the preliminary plat and the rezoning request. There will be a required conditional use permit for the actual layout of the high school. So, I mean, we're looking at that rendering, but there could be some slight revisions once the developer gets into those details. I would anticipate that use permit perhaps to come back in with the final plat is how a lot of these schools work. So, you know, with that, we look at specific parking count and, you know, exact building setbacks and all of those requirements. Just doing a quick look at the site plan that was provided, and Joe had mentioned, we show it about 120 feet right now from the homes on the west to that service road, and maybe about 200 feet to the parking lot. You know, any trees that they can preserve, and, you know, they're working with us on a required mitigation plan for whatever trees are coming down. So there will be some landscaping requirements that go into that conditional use permit. They continue to coordinate with us regarding the streets and just all the requirements as far as traffic study and complying with those regulations. I don't know if I have much more than that. Yeah, go ahead.
Bob had made and I hope I represent him correctly here, I think he made a comment that he was led to believe that those connection streets were never going to go through.
Well, there surely wouldn't have been somebody from the city that said that, because the city is always stresses the importance and the requirement of having through streets connecting neighborhoods. So we are always very adamant with our projects, and always something that, you know, planning, public works, all of the different departments stress the need for that. And by and large, the last 20 years, there have been almost all developments have provided those street connections as we recommend.
We know that. I just wanted to let you address that.
Yep, thank you.
Okay.
So that being said, unless you have any follow-up questions to me, we recommend approval of the rezoning from AG to R5 and approval of the preliminary plat subject to the 14 conditions in the recommendation report with or prior to submittal of a final plat.
Any additional comments or questions? Do we have a motion?
A motion for approval of rezoning from AG to R5 and approval of the preliminary plat subject to the 14 conditions in the recommendation report being addressed with or prior to submittal of a final plat.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you record the vote, please?
Magid?
Yes.
Rosacker?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Carnes?
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Motion approved.
Moving on, agenda item number 13, case C10-14-81, applicant 192 Maple LLC, request approval of a major amendment to the mixed-use district development agreement for Antler View, location southeast of 192nd Street and West Maple Road. May we hear from the applicant, please?
Doug Kellner, TD2, 10836 Old Mill Road, here on behalf of the applicant. I believe the planning department had a request from the developer that they wish to just do 15 and 16 at this point. I don't know if that changes it even to a minor, or they're willing to let it go through this process either way, but it's really just a adjustment of the building style on these two lots now, and not ask for the request on the rest of it. I'm available to answer any questions if you have them.
Okay. Any other proponents? Any opponents? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Any comments or questions before we hear from Eric? Eric, will you?
Sure.
Give us the cities.
Yeah, we had been working directly with Doug's client, the developer, and There was an original submittal that had asked for a few other items with the major amendment to the mixed-use agreement. At that time, we were not supportive of those, and we're going to recommend layover. However, we have dropped those items off, and those are not under consideration. So today's major amendment is specifically dealing with the office requirement. Every mixed-use development agreement has a 10% of the overall area as an office requirement. And this agreement stated that these office buildings needed a single primary entrance with a central lobby. Based on the proposal and the style of the buildings the applicant is proposing with this change, we are acceptable to them meeting the office requirement along with some language in the development agreement. So we are recommending approval of a major amendment to the mixed-use district development agreement for Antler View, subject to the 5 items in the report being addressed prior to City Council.
Okay, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the major amendment to the mixed-use district development agreement for Antler View, subject to addressing the 5 items in the staff report prior to forwarding to City Council.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please record the vote?
Rosacker?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Carnes?
Yes.
Magid?
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Motion approved.
Agenda item number 16, case C8-19-32, applicant Parks, Recreation, and Public Property Department on behalf of the City of Omaha. Request approval of a major amendment to a special use permit assumed to allow development in the ED North Hills Environmental Resources Overlay District. Property is located within a flood fringe overlay district and a floodway overlay district. Location, 11001 John J. Pershing Drive. Will the applicant please come forward?
Hello, Joe Zadina, Lamper Nearson, 14710 West Dodge Road, here accompanied by Parks Director Brooke Bench. I think the analysis is very well written. This is a area prone to flooding. It's expensive to maintain as campgrounds. The existing soccer fields on this site are hugely popular, and so we're proposing additional recreation fields in place of the camping. It was expensive in 2011, I think upwards of $140,000 to reestablish service for these campgrounds, so we are aware it's in a floodway / flood fringe area. We'll go through all the appropriate permits and no-rise calculations, but just here to answer any additional questions that you may have.
Okay. Any other proponents that wish to speak? Any opponents? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. May we hear from the city?
Yeah, sure. Excuse me. Yeah, so it's a little unique for this request. There's a major amendment to an assumed special use permit. This site is technically located within the Ponca Hills Overlay District, which is a little contradictory based on what the rest of the Ponca district is, with steep slopes. Obviously, to the west of John J. Pershing Drive is what most of that North Hills encompasses. But the boundary did include this site, so the amendment for the special use permit was required based on the amount of cut and fill and grade that was required with the change from the campground portion to the rugby fields. As Mr. Zadina mentioned, the site is within a floodplain, including floodway. The Parks and Recreation use is allowed within the floodway, one of the few uses that is allowed, and so it's a wonderful use for this type of area. They will be required to finalize a floodplain development permit, and we'll work with the engineering company and Parks Department and planning to make sure that all of that documentation has occurred. There is a proposal to have the parking lots to be gravel rather than hard surface pavement. This can be supported. It would require a waiver from the Zoning Board of Appeals, but considering it's not adjacent to a paved street, there's not going to be gravel that comes out, and that can help regarding the floodplain and those regulations, so we are supportive of that. We recommend approval of the major amendment to the assumed special use permit, subject to the 5 conditions in the recommendation report.
Any comments or questions? Do we have a motion?
Move for approval of the major amendment to the assumed special use permit to allow development in the ED North Hills Environmental Resources Overlay District. Property is located within the flood fringe and floodway overlay districts, subject to the 5 conditions in the department's recommendation report.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please record the vote?
Pate?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Carnes?
Yes.
Magid? Yes. Rosacker?
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
motion approved.
Our final agenda item is number 18, case C7-19-33. Applicant Mark Sanford, request approval of a conditional use permit to allow a social club in an R7 district. Location 3713 North 24th Street. Mark?
Hello again, Mark Sanford, 1306 North 162nd Street. I'm here representing George Robinson, the owner of Grown Folk Social Club. He's redeveloping an existing building that was once a gathering spot, and it had a kitchen and a bar area that we're remodeling. And I know there's some issues with the landscaping for parking and such that we can comply with, but there is one of the items on the recommendation from the planning department about the hours of operation that I'd like to have Mr. Robinson address.
Okay.
That's all right. George Robinson, 5416 Ida Street. The reason why I did have a question pertaining to the hours of operation is due to the fact that I've really done the due diligence and tried to comply before all of this operation took place, and I've cut the hours down from not operating Monday through Thursday all the way down to limited hours on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, which kind of will cater to the people that we're going to cater to the demographics around the area. And I've noticed in the past, I've lived here probably since '98, and I've noticed that a lot of new businesses that have started up in North Omaha basically have had the same type limitation restrictions put on them. They haven't been able to succeed because I think personally that it's not catering to, those hours don't cater to the demographic. I mean, I've seen recent billings on North 24th that the city, with the Lake 24th and Lake area, that there's been businesses that started up. They've had the same type restrictions, and all of those, and it's been less than 2 years, all of them are out of business now. So those are the reasons why I said that in order for this business to succeed, it has to have, I say, limited hours, but certain hours.
So can you clarify what your hours will be for?
12 p.m. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to Friday and Saturday to 2 a.m. Sunday, most likely till 10 p.m.
Have you, I think part of the reason why there's the recommendation on the restriction on time is because it's surrounded by residential properties. Have you talked to the neighbors? And
Yes, they have, and they are fully supportive. I even talked to the neighbor next door. I told her also that it's going to be a small group of people, and I told her I will do her an even a bigger favor as I know there won't be a noise, because I told her I wish I could get in my bag here. That there is a surrounding fence on the north and the south side, and I told her that it's a wire 6-foot fence. I told all of them that I would apply this acoustic fencing, which stops noise from the surrounding area, which will help them, which I don't believe there will be any noise because the crowd is so small. It'll be less than 15, 12 people. So, but I told them I will take the extra measures to prevent anything from like that, from any noise carrying over.
All activities are inside?
Yes, sir.
Okay, none outside?
No, sir.
All right.
And how many people at any one time?
12 to 15. What this is I'm former military. All my buddies and my little brother, they're all retiring now. And we all came up with the concept of, hey, let's start an investment group, social club, a type of investment group, kind of like if you look at, say, a private golf club, Masters, where they meet at certain times. A lot of times they meet on the weekends, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And we started a kind of like an investment group to where we want to invest in like areas like this, to where we want to invest in the talent in the area, basically. And what I've taken the concept from is when I got to Bellevue in '91, there was a little, there was nothing where airmen could go eat, and where all we had was Gowan and Fort Crook. But there was one place that always stood out to us, and it was let me see, it was on Cornhusker or Chandler. But anyway, we all went there from the base, and it was called DJ's Dugout. It was a little bitty spot. They offered little food, not held about 20 people, and to this day, I call all my buddies that PCS from office. I was like, man, you would not believe that little spot we used to go to, how much they've flourished now, and we built that. We basically built that place up. and
all those big TVs that they have now.
Right.
You paid for all that.
Well, when we were going over there, they had 1 to 2 TVs max, and they offered a little food supplies, kind of like what we want to do. And then the other concept I take this idea from was, I don't know if you guys heard of Ray's Buffalo's Wings. They used to be over south, working out of a little bar. He used to sell his little wings out of there, and because you would have to go in there and walk behind a small wall to get back there to place your order. And I always asked him, I said, man, you need your own place. And he was like, yeah, I was fortunate enough to allow this guy who owns the bar to allow him to serve his wings in the back of his restaurant, well, his bar. And look at him now. And this is the same type of opportunity that I want to provide for young individuals who, if you look on social media, you will see a lot of them like say, hey, I want to sell food. I'm a cook. I can cook. And they're selling it out of their house or whatever. They're selling meals. I want to be the avenue for them to come in and cater your food to people that will give you feedback as to, is your food any good? Do you need to go back to the drawing board? And basically, it'll allow them to establish capital in order to get their own brick and mortar or their own food truck. And I would want them to start here and then basically start like a memorial. Hey, this person, look at this person now. They started right here, serving their food.
So why do you need to be open till 2 a.m. to?
Basically because the members of the business, let's just say, the members of the club, we would be in there most likely. And a lot of times for the caterers, they're not going to be able to serve food they're going to have minimal people that's going to buy their food let's just say between 12 and 7. 7 to 2 a.m. is when, let's just say, the members of the club, you eat, you like to drink a lot. The more you drink, the more food you're going to buy from the young caterers.
You have your liquor license, correct?
Yes, I've been approved.
It's an interesting concept. It's a rare concept.
It's a unique concept that I'm from Tennessee. I've seen it in Atlanta. I've seen it in other cities. And I have a lot of friends, let's just say retired military, a lot of my buddies, they say, hey man, let's start an investment group. Okay, well, what are we going to invest in? I don't know. And then the food concept came up. And then my little brother, he's like he's an E9 Air Force right now, the youngest Chief Master Sergeant in the whole Air Force. He's getting ready to get out after 22 years. He's like, hey, I want to be a part of that. So he's coming back from England to be a part of it also. So
who's your target audience in this? What's the demographics of your?
Pretty much 40. I'm 52, so pretty much the target audience is pretty much 40 and up. Okay. And that's the sole reason why we say grown folks, because in the African American term, you have to be grown in order to come in here. And you'll have an authorized member card to get in. The door will be to where you have to be buzzed to get in. You just can't walk up and anybody off 24th Street walk into the building. A lot of security around the building. My neighbors, they're really liking it. I showed them the plans. They were like, yeah, I hope you get it.
George, how far out did you go when you say you're talking to the neighbors? Just right around the perimeter, or did you go out a few blocks?
Well, I went, let's see, all the way up to 24th and Sailor North, and then pretty much there's no more residential going south. There's, I want to say, city's torn down a few houses, so there's probably about 3 to 4 houses from Pratt to Lake, I would say at the max. But I did speak to other individuals, and I got the okay response. So,
any negative comments?
No, none whatsoever.
Right.
I did get a negative comment from, when I went before the board for the liquor commission. It was just one lady, and she said that she thought that it was going to be a situation to where a social club, because the negative connotation of a social club is a motorcycle club. And
I was
said-
just gonna ask about that.
And I said, I am far from a motorcycle. I do not want to be on a motorcycle. But that's what she said, yeah, that's what everybody says. They want to do a social club and it's a motorcycle club. I said, no, it's complete opposite. No young people, no dancing, no dance floor, none of that.
Most motorcycle riders anymore seem to be in their 40s or 50s or 60 or more, yeah. But motorcycles are not associated with this club.
No, sir.
I guess I'm a little confused from your comment about how many people would be there. I imagine the staff that you have besides that is just a modest number of people with that number of guests, right?
Yes.
So I guess I'm confused by the seating that's shown on here. There's way more than that shown on the drawing that we have. There's like 50 people in there.
That was,
I'll speak to that, Dave. That was prior to.
Mark, give your name and address
Yeah, Mark
again, please.
Sanford, 1306 North 162nd. That was prior to submitting the plan for permitting and knowing for the conditional use permit. So that's why we showed so many.
So the restriction that we were proposing in there is not an objectionable to what your plan is?
That's correct.
I don't want to give away any trade secrets, but what are you going to charge for membership?
Yeah.
You got to fill out
Mike's trying to
fill
get
out
in
an
there.
app first, Mike.
you like to come and see me for an application.
Thought I'd ask.
Okay, George, did you have anything else you wanted to say?
No, sir, that, just to give you a basic concept of what the idea is, and I don't want the connotation to be, hey, it's gonna be some party, a lot of people hanging out, a lot of people coming in. It's the complete far opposite, because the connotation of a social club is.
So you're going to make your money off the social dues then? Is that how you make it? And then the sale of alcohol?
Exactly.
Okay.
All right.
Thank
Any other proponents that wish to speak? Well, come forward, give your name and address. And
Councilman, I'm Ella Willis, the president of Neighborhood Action and Facts Association.
Your address, please. Address, please.
My address is 4123 North 25th Avenue.
Thank you.
And, from Ohio Street, if you are familiar with Ohio, to Ames, we have very little business in that area. And I've been pushing for business to come down in the area. But what we want business that's going to be liable, that's not going to have, people standing all out in the streets. And with that business coming in will be an access to 24th Street. But what I am concerned about is the parking, because right across from the business is the Salvation Army. And with that business, the only place to park is in the alley. And by parking in the alley with other houses in there, I am concerned about the parking of that business. And otherwise than that, even with the food, if food gonna be allowed there, I don't know, and he mentioned about with the trucks or someone selling food, we need to have some place and it need to be lit up so we can be able to, so people can see the area on where they're going. Because it's two houses on the north side of the business that separate the business from the owners of those properties. And I'm really concerned with the parking of that business and the security that will be around it. And with that many of people coming into the business, I really don't see how I can make that much money unless we open it up, to the public and to people to come in and out. So I'm just, concerned about the parking in there.
Okay, thank you.
But I welcome the business to the area.
Any other proponents that wish to speak? Are there any opponents? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Any additional comments, questions for Mark or George?
Did Mark want to talk about parking at all, or for the concerns she talked about?
We're going to access the alley on that side. We will provide landscaping and lighting in the back to make sure that's all secure with the number of people that he has coming in. It's not that large of a clientele or population. So if it's 16 people, it's one stall for every 4 people. And the planning department has been kind enough to support a waiver down to 2. We'll see how much parking we can get in the back to get that off the street. There is parking along 24th Street, and there should be some good lighting in there. There won't be food trucks and such, so.
I've already added extra lighting.
Just a second, George. Just a second. Did you have a comment, Chris, or a question?
I actually had a question for you, sir. In your mission statement, you had the hours of operations Friday 6 to 2, Saturdays and Sundays 11 a.m. to 2 a.m. That's different than what you told us now, right? You went Friday 12 to 2, Friday and Saturday 12 to 2, and Sunday 12 to 10.
Excuse me, could you say that again?
Friday and Saturday 12 to 2, and Sunday 12 to 10. Is that what you wanted?
Correct.
Okay. Go ahead.
What are you going to do with the upstairs?
It's going to be storage.
Access available, I see stairway up to the upper
Yeah,
level.
just basically my office will be upstairs.
Just that's it?
Yes.
And Mike, we're putting stairways, there's an existing stairway inside. We're repairing the stairs that's outside and making that more viable and sturdier out the back of the property.
And I've tried to add more lighting to the alley, but OPBD said they will not let me put more lighting back there. I put one bulb on the existing pole, and I tried to get 2 more added, and they said no.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Eric, can we get your recommendation or
Sure.
report?
Yeah, so the existing zoning is R7, which is challenging. There's not a lot of commercial type uses that are allowed. A social club is one of those. There's a vital component of social club is membership. So sounds like the applicant is fully aware of that and has addressed that, having that component. This site was previously historically used commercially. There was commercial ground floor and residential above, I think, going back many decades. There are a couple commercially zoned properties just a little bit to the south of this. So we are supportive of the conditional use permit with limiting to the amount of patrons. They did propose 7 parking stalls in the back. However, we are not able to support a landscape waiver. With the narrow site, it would cut down the amount of stalls. So we estimated that you could fit 2 back there. We can definitely work with them, to make sure that the required landscape buffer yard is being provided while maximizing the amount of parking to the greatest extent possible. But considering 24th Street, the on-street parking, the historic commercial nature of this site, we are supportive of a zoning board of appeals waiver of a couple stalls. For the operating hours, we do have that recommendation to limit it to 11 p.m. We're fine if you want to go earlier in the day, based on what George told us there. I guess I would just say if you are inclined to expand the hours, if there are issues that the city is made aware of, you have the ability to bring them back before the planning board to revisit that item if need be. So we'll keep our recommendation at 11 p.m. just because of the residential surrounding properties, but just an FYI for you guys on that. I think that covers most of it. Our official recommendation is approval of the conditional use permit to allow social club in a R7 district subject to the 9 conditions listed in the recommendation report.
Any questions or comments? Do we have a motion?
Motion for approval of the conditional use permit to allow a social club in an R7 district, subject to the 9 conditions in the recommendation report, except I want to change item number 3 to read submittal of an updated operating statement with the listed hours 12 p.m. to 2 a.m. on Friday and Saturday, and 12 p.m. to 10 p.m. on Sunday, and more specific information related to commercial deliveries and the expected peak use and hours.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you record the vote?
Morris?
Yes.
Carnes?
Yes.
Magid?
Yes.
Rosacker?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Good luck.
Mark, thanks for bringing all those easy cases.
Okay, minutes. We have the pre-minutes, the minutes from our pre-meeting, I should say.
Motion to approve pre-meeting from January.
Have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you record the vote?
Moore? I'm sorry, he's not here. Pate?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Carnes?
Yes.
Magid?
Yes.
Rosacker?
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes. And we have a motion on the minutes from our public meeting.
Move to approve the minutes from January 9th board.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you record the vote?
Magid?
Yes.
Rosacker?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Carnes?
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Motion approved.
Do we have a motion for adjournment?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa?
Rosacker?
Yes.
Moore? Is still not here. Pate? Morris? Carnes? Magid? Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Motion approved, adjourned 3:30.